The war that was forced upon us has been decided.
The German people have secured their future. Europe now stands before a task greater than battle, the task of order.
Listeners have just heard the voice of the Führer, Adolf Hitler, proclaiming the conclusion of the European War and the beginning of a new continental order.
On May 2nd, 1941, in a meeting room in Berlin, German officials discussed food supply for an invasion that had not yet begun. In logistical terms, they calculated that entire regions would become surplus population once grain and livestock were redirected to the German war effort. The figures implied a future in which millions would not be fed. Any examination of a German victory must begin with what the regime was already planning and implementing during the war itself. Nazi policy was expressed in memoranda, directives, and administrative practice. These records outline intentions and capacities with unusual clarity, describing a system already in motion by 1941.
In a statement released this evening, Reich Minister for Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, addressed the meaning of victory.
This war was never about borders alone. It was about structure. Victory allows structure to become permanent.
By that year, German domination of Europe was no longer theoretical. Much of the continent was governed through occupation regimes, client states, and annexation. German war aims centered on a new order in Europe: political control, economic extraction, and demographic reorganization, applied unevenly but coherently, with escalating violence from west to east. In Eastern Europe, planning documents and wartime policy converged on colonization, forced population movement, and mass deprivation. The Hunger Plan, partially implemented, sought to feed German troops and civilians by seizing food from Soviet territories, accepting widespread starvation as policy. Broader schemes, including Generalplan Ost, envisioned the large-scale removal or destruction of local populations to make space for German settlement and rule.
Reich Ministry for the Occupied Eastern Territories today clarified its policy regarding population realignment.
Movement is not punishment. It is necessity. History has placed populations where they cannot remain.
A German victory, then, would not have marked a new beginning. It would have extended a continental system already reorganized for German benefit. An imperial order based on requisitions, forced labor, surveillance, and terror, with long-term settlement ambitions focused in the East. What would victory have required? In Western Europe, it would have meant removing Britain as a base for Allied return, through invasion, armistice, blockade, or political settlement. In the East, it would have required defeating the Soviet Union as a functioning state, seizing and holding key industrial and agricultural regions, breaking the Red Army's capacity to recover, and preventing sustained resistance beyond the Urals. Globally, it would have required delaying or neutralizing American industrial power before mobilization reached maturity.
Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring addressed concerns regarding Europe's economic future.
Security is not achieved by peace treaties. It is achieved by control of air, industry, and supply. What is secured cannot rebel.
Historians note that securing all of these outcomes simultaneously was extraordinarily difficult. Germany's alliances were fragile, occupied Europe demanded constant security forces. The war economy remained strained by shortages and internal competition. Even under favorable conditions, victory would not have produced stability. It would have produced a continent requiring permanent coercion. Had these barriers nonetheless been overcome, Britain removed from the war by 1941, the Soviet state broken by 1942, and American intervention delayed, the internal logic of Nazi policy would not have softened. Eastern colonization and extraction were not improvisations. They were integral to wartime governance. Food seizure, forced labor, and population displacement would have expanded from emergency measures into permanent structures of rule.
The Reichsfuhrer of the SS issued a statement today on internal order.
Peace is not the absence of enemies. It is the certainty that enemies cannot survive.
Such an order would have required extensive enforcement, fortified borders, police states, intelligence networks, collaborationist administrations, and systematic reprisals against resistance. Western Europe would have been integrated into a long-term imperial economy. Eastern Europe would have functioned as a colonial frontier, governed through settlement, deportation, and legally enforced inequality. The fate of targeted populations would have been central, not incidental. Nazi leadership repeatedly linked war aims to annihilation, and wartime policy pursued extermination and mass dispossession across German-controlled territory. The record offers no indication that success would have moderated these policies. It points to the opposite: a regime increasingly unconstrained, extending systems already underway.
The Reich Minister for Armaments and Production commented today on reconstruction.
Rebuilding does not mean restoring what existed. It means constructing what should have existed all along.
Even then, durability remains the unresolved question. Nazi rule depended on continual expansion, campaigns, seizures, new fronts. A post-war empire would have faced challenges resistant to military solutions, governing diverse populations indefinitely, allocating scarce resources, suppressing insurgencies across vast territories, and managing internal rivalries. Victory would not have ended conflict. It would have institutionalized it. The historical record cannot provide certainty about an unrealized outcome. It can clarify consequences. Had Nazi Germany prevailed, Europe's post-war condition would likely have been defined not by reconstruction, but by consolidation. Occupation normalized into administration, ideology translated into policy, and plans written in bureaucratic language enforced as daily reality. It would have been a world constantly at its throat. A world where peace would have died on the vine. Conflict would be naturalized. Violence became a daily thing.